The Dolphins make some roster transaction, an NFL insider update on Mike McDaniel, and whose seat should be hottest here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it. We live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get bets just $5. And if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Today on the show, we're busy. We got a lot. We already did our Dolphins squad with Jeff Scanina and Jim Grieshaber. That was live at noon on the YouTube channel. It'll go up on your podcast feed if it's not there already. I'm sitting down a little bit after that. Kind of reset, recharge. About 2:30 in the afternoon here on Wednesday. Dolphins practice today. Storm Duck back at practice. The winds are going to start rolling, guys. Just wait. But today on the show, we heard from, courtesy of the Rich Eisen show, we heard from NFL insider Jeremy Fowler. And he talked about Mike McDaniel and his job outlook, including some things about what Stephen Ross has involved as this process plays itself out and debating changes and this, that, the other. I have a pretty firm belief in whose seat should be the hottest. I've heard from a lot of you. Now's the time. We're going to talk about it today on the show. And then some of these roster transactions, Dolphins adding a practice squad player, put somebody on IR, put somebody on the active roster from the practice squad, so shuffling guys around. Some thoughts on that. So let's start with Jeremy Fowler, who became the latest NFL insider to kind of do the thing. And by do the thing, I mean touch on Mike McDaniel and his job security on a various amounts of mediums that are available. And he talked at length about where Stephen Ross is at. And he also did the thing where he kind of went to bat for Mike McDaniel, just like James Palmer did and just like Tom Pelissero did in the last 3 weeks. So I want to read some snippets from the transcript of what Jeremy Fowler had to say on the Rich Eisen show. Mike McDaniel's seat is moderately hot, I would say. I think that ownership there really likes Mike McDaniel a lot. This is not something where they're looking for an excuse to move on from him right now, so I don't expect anything at this moment. This week, I feel like they want to give him a little bit of time, but there are a lot of factors that go into that kind of situation. One of which is your team getting better? Is it lifeless? Are the seats in the stands in Miami Gardens empty? Those factors that could go on. They have some home games that are pretty ugly. If the fans turn on the team, that's when Stephen Ross could make a move. My understanding is Stephen Ross has his sons involved in the process, so they could be a factor here in the future of Miami and what they do. There's more of the quote, but let's start there. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but the fans have already flown Fire McDaniel banners over each of the first 2 home games. So if the fans turning on the team is one of the hallmarks of something changing and happening, man, I hate to say it, kind of feels like we've already checked that box off the list. Now, the team has been feisty. They've been uncoordinated. They've been unpolished. At times they've been undisciplined. Then they're at times overmatched. Some of it's personnel. Some of it is coaching. Some of it is easily avoidable mistakes. Some of it's bad luck. But you are what your record says you are, and you are 1-4 and just blew a 17-point lead in the first half against a team that's won like 5 football games in their last 20. Carolina Panthers. If that doesn't tell you what you are right now, I don't know what will. So the other thing that's interesting to me about that part of the quote from Fowler is he says they have some home games that if they are pretty ugly, if the fans turn on the team, that's when Stephen Ross could make a move. Well, they play it Sunday at home, and then they don't play again until Halloween at home. And that's short week against the Baltimore Ravens. So is Sunday a catastrophe? If you win, I think a lot of this gets quiet for a bit until you then have your 2 home games in 10-day stretch with Baltimore, who's going to be healthier. Well, they've been a disaster. They're a worse defense than you are right now. But they'll probably have Lamar Jackson back for that stretch. And then obviously the Buffalo Bills come to town before you go overseas. So there's some moving parts there. So there's some context clues that are maybe interesting for the Dolphins offense. But this is only half of what Jeremy Fowler really talked about. He proceeds to talk about the situation, the state of affairs of the team. He's been given a team whose roster is in transition. The defense clearly lost a lot of key players that they felt would be good to move on from for the locker room's sake, but they backfilled them with players that aren't as talented. So they're not working with a team that's ready-made to win right now, at least on that side of the ball. And then you lose Tyreek Hill to shoot Mike McDaniel a little bail. He's got a quarterback who can't really take a lot of hits, if at all, because of the concussion history, so there's some limitations that he's working with. I put this in the A to Z sports story I wrote about this, but this feels like that Simpsons meme with Bart Simpson where the whole class is turned around and they say the line, Bart. Say the line, Bart. And the line is, this is now the third NFL insider in 3 weeks after a Dolphins loss to go on some, whether it's Steve Smith's podcast with James Palmer, or it's Tom Pelissero, or now it's Jeremy Fowler. Mike's really got his hands tied behind his back with trying to work with Tua because he can't do anything with Tua. Tua can't take any hits. They have to get the ball out fast. And again, multiple things can be true. But Mike McDaniel, wherever that's coming from, whether that's Mike or Mike's agent or Mike's whatever or Mike's buddy or somebody else on the coach, wherever it's coming from, you know, had 3 insiders say it on 3 separate outlets. It's not coincidental that all 3 have some variation of the same observation without this coming from somebody. We talked about this on the last show. James Palmer's was the thing holding Tyreek Hill back. This was after week 3. Is Tua. It's not that Tua can't play. It's that Mike has to run an offense to protect Tua. You're running an offense with a quarterback you can't allow to get hit. It's timing offense. Now, with it being a timing offense, you can't allow yourself to be in a position where you have longer developing plays. The longer developing concepts also need to be on time. Can you allow Tua to sit back there that long with injury concerns that the Dolphins have with Tua? You can't. Pelissero on the Rich Eisen show said there's not enough talk about the hoops that Mike McDaniel has to jump through week in and week out basis to get a game plan for a quarterback who can't get hit. You can't have him holding the ball. You can't design runs. You can't have quarterback sneaks. Tom Brady ran a pass route in the Super Bowl. Didn't end well, but they put it in the game plan. You can't do that with Tua. You can't run a naked bootleg. You're not going to run zone read to keep people honest. All these things combined make it really hard to produce week in and week out basis. Man, there's some central themes from all these guys whose living is stemmed from talking to people within the league. And I believe some of that is true. But it's also true, and I made this point when I saw Palmer and Pelissero say the same thing within a 3-day period 2 weeks ago, that doesn't matter when you went up to the owner's box and advocated for the owner to get the contract extension with a quarterback done. Even if it's true, and I believe to an extent it is true. You cannot absolve yourself of blame now that you are in the line of fire, that you're handcuffed and there's a restrictor plate on your offense, when you advocated to the owner to make that $1/5 billion commitment. That's not 1 + 1 = 2 to me. Like, that would take a very convenient short-term memory for something like that to effectively absolve you of blame in the search for accountability amidst the mess the Dolphins find themselves in at 1-4. Now, I think Mike is probably the least. Well, let's go to break. And then I want to sort through my thoughts on the hottest seats. Who should be the hottest? Who should be the first person to go? This allocation of angst and frustration that you feel. I know you feel it because I feel it. I just try not to get unhinged on the program about it. And if I feel that way, I go outside and I touch some grass, and I wake up again the next morning, and we say, I want to be mad, but I want to be mad at the right things, and I want to be mad at the right people for the right things, so that I can unemotionally have a conversation about where this went awry and how you fix it, or how you can fix it, whether it's with the people that are here or the people that are not. So we're going to go to break, and then we're going to talk about the hot seat nature of what is happening in Miami. We're going to talk about that next. Make sure you guys stick with us. NFL season is here. FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. You pick a bet, put down $5. If it hits, you unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love FanDuel because no matter how you like to play, it has it for you, whether that's parlays, spreads, game totals, player props, live lines during the games, you name it, FanDuel has it. It makes watching football that much more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action for yourself. So whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com, download the FanDuel app today, and go ahead and get started. There's big picture and short-term conversations regarding the assignment of blame. And I think it's really hard to have some of these conversations in what is limited to a 25 to 30-minute block. Like, I could realistically do probably a week's worth of programming on Chris Grier and what the idea of the team to build was, your execution of the Brian Flores tenure of that chapter, the transition from Brian Flores to Mike McDaniel, the switch in the psychology of building a team when Mike McDaniel gets here, and how dramatically different that is. And now trying to undo that because we got all antsy and hot under the collar for a couple of guys that were available to trade. I could do a week's worth of programming just on the Chris Grier team building approach. And I'll be transparent, right? Like, I'm a fan of the team, just like all of you are that are tuning in, or maybe some of you are hate listening or hate watching, or maybe some of you are fans of rival teams. And I'm good for any given show during the week. I'm good for 2 or 3 comments from a Bills fan that makes it wants to make sure everybody knows that they're a Bills fan, and they're leaving comments and enjoying the commentary on how bad the Dolphins are right now, because there's nobody circles the wagons and makes everything about themselves quite like a YouTube commenter Buffalo Bills fan. But I would say this piece of it for me, this starts and ends. This conversation starts and ends with Chris Grier. That's the nature of the job as the general manager of the team. You're responsible for the football operation. And I don't know how much assignment of blame to give Chris Grier from 2016, 2017, and 2018. But I know he was given the keys to the castle unquestioned in 2019. And the conversation that you can have was their choice to hire a coach was a coach that lasted 3 years and tried to burn the whole thing down from the inside. Regardless of his motivations and things that he was right about or not right about, and I think one of the things that he was right about is, as you reflect on South Florida and Miami and what this collection became the last 18 months, was he talked about star players and star power and team over stars. And I think that's a psychology that this market probably needs. Well, think about the height of the Dolphins as an organization in the 1970s. It was blue collar. It was toughness. Shit, excuse my French. The nickname of the defense was the no-name defense because there was a bunch of no-name guys versus glitz and glamour and speed and greatest show on surf. And now everybody wants to come to Miami. Miami's a cool place to be. They pay you down there in Miami. Everybody gets paid in Miami. Life is fast. You're on network. You're on the national broadcast. Too cool for school. Good for the brand. Could start my clothing line store. Start my player podcast. You name it. Great exposure. They don't push you too hard. I think that's something that I don't think can be a piece of the puzzle, right? But that's something I think Brian Flores was probably right about when he talked about star players versus non-star players and team element and all that, especially with Miami. But you made a head coaching hire and it didn't work. So then you transition to a new head coaching hire, and the number one job of the new coaching hire that you made was to salvage and maximize your pick at quarterback. That's good team building from if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have anything standpoint, right? So I get why you do that, but is that really the best motivation to make a hire? And that's where it gets dangerous with half resets and transitions and half of this changes, but not half of that changes. Because at its core, Mike McDaniel really did the thing that you hired him to do. And I'm sympathetic to Mike McDaniel in that regard. He was hired with Tua Tagovailoa in mind. We think Tua Tagovailoa can play. Brian Flores didn't give him a chance to. Who can we hire that will give Tua Tagovailoa a chance to play and be a quality NFL quarterback? And I know it's really popular right now to say Tua is the worst quarterback in the NFL, but I got bad news for you. He's not. I think he's a sufficient level starting quarterback, and if things are good around him, I think he can be a quality starting quarterback. But he's not the great fixer, right? There's trucks and trailers is the analogy. I think Tua is a great chef, to make an analogy. You can give Tua great ingredients around him, and he'll make you a delicious meal that goes down smooth, and it looks great on a plate. But if there's bad ingredients around, as we're finding out this year, and he's charged with making a 5-star, 4-course meal with stuff that expired 3 days ago, the meal's not going to taste very good. It's probably not going to look very good. Even if it's a meal, and even if it will be eaten, maybe it tastes all right. And there's an argument to be made that, Tua doesn't have the right kind of support around him, but that goes back to Mike McDaniel. And Mike McDaniel, and when he first got here in the conversations of he made a 700-play reel to convince the football operations staff that we need to lean into weapons for spacing. We don't need to lean into offensive line and trench play. And for 2 years, it worked. And then you ran into a glass ceiling last year and had to coach around your offensive line. And now you've tried to fix it, and you're down to your third string right guard. Your rookie left guard's playing like a rookie because he's never played left guard before. And your starting right tackle's out. So it's very messy, right? Like there's things that there's accountability for each of the parties here. But it all starts at the top. The hottest seat that should exist is that of Chris Grier. Because Chris Grier's name is on the bottom line of everything with this football product now. No ands, ifs, or buts about it. The lack of depth because you went buck wild with draft picks is Chris Grier. Who drafted the quarterback that you feel like has some limitations that he has a hard time transcending negative game scripts late in game in 2-minute situations? It's Chris Grier. Who hired the coach who has had a regression with his offensive scheme and his willingness to adjust and to find different buttons to push outside of an original plan when he first got here the first 2 years? Who hired him? Oh, it's Chris Grier. This conversation, your entire product, your entire football operation product starts with Chris. Now, unfortunately, Chris, we hear from Chris probably 4 or 5 times a year. We hear from Stephen Ross even less. And the Stephen Ross element of this is another conversation that I didn't even get into. But you can't fire an owner. So you only hope that the owner looks at the amount of time in which you've kind of been steadfast in your direction, and the people that have been inside the building that are impressing their values on what your football operation looks like. And you hope that we see the writing on the wall for not just the X's and O's and the frustrating things on game days and running the ball for 19 yards and whether or not they got the right personnel packages out there, or whether or not you hired the right defensive coordinator. We didn't even talk about the defense, right? Who put together the roster of the guys that are struggling to find chemistry together right now? Well, it's Chris Grier. So the microscope is firmly on Mike McDaniel right now because he's the head coach of the team and he's the one who's out there in front. I don't think Mike should even have the hottest seat. I think Mike's seat should be hot. Some more thoughts on this we're going to get into after the break. Stick with us.
I'm Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, and this episode is brought to you by Peloton. Peloton is shaping the future of fitness with the brand new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus, powered by Peloton IQ. This is Peloton's most advanced equipment yet, giving you real-time guidance and endless ways to move, whether you're running, lifting, or you're cross-training with your favorite instructors like Alex Toussaint. It's training reimagined to make your workout more personal. Peloton is built for breakthroughs with features that help you plan, stay motivated, and hit peak performance. You can let yourself run, lift, flex, and go while Peloton handles all the rest. Plus, Peloton IQ provides real-time strength coaching, tracking your progress and suggesting weights that challenge you so you can get stronger. Plus, the new movement tracking camera, it counts your reps and corrects your form in real time, making sure every rep is safer and smarter. So let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton Cross-Training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
So I don't think I've left a lot of room for interpretation. Now, I would like to impress, again, the idea that multiple things can be true at the same time. I think it's true that Chris Grier's fingerprints are the most frequent amongst what the problems there are that exist on this football team. I think it's true that Mike McDaniel probably has the least, because he probably has a legitimate argument to say, look, things that I maybe want to do offensively, I don't know that I can, because Tua Tagovailoa is a skill-specific quarterback. And it certainly seems like the argument, now that we're in the crossfire of the Game of Thrones chaos is a ladder chapter of this season, is I can't expand how I need to in order to take my offense to the next level. But it's also true that Mike went up to the owner's office and advocated for Tua Tagovailoa to get his contract extension done, which means I also believe that I don't think you can detach yourself from the hip of that, which goes back to the messiness of partial resets. And why I think that is so hard for me to wrap my head around personally as a viable solution to what ails the Dolphins. To say, well, we'll let Mike pick his own quarterback and we'll bring in a new GM. Because now Mike's timeline is not the same timeline as a quarterback's or a general manager's. Right? And what happens, this is what happened in the 2010s when you had the great civil wars with Tony Sparano and Jeff Ireland, and then Jeff Ireland and Joe Philbin. And then it got to a point where you couldn't hire a GM in 2014. So you had to hire Dennis Hickey. Dennis Hickey was there for a year. Dennis Hickey's been out of being the executive, the general manager of the Dolphins since 2015. He was out of the league in 2016. He was a college scout for the Bills from 17 to 2021. And now he's only just now worked himself back up to being an assistant director of player personnel from 2022 to 2025 with the New York Giants. That guy was your GM a decade ago. And he only got the job because you couldn't get anybody to bite and take the job. So that's the danger part of where you're teetering now. If you want to hold on to parts because you think this part of the Dolphins is salvageable. Well, what happens when you go for a GM interview and he says, well, I don't want to take this job because I got a head coach that I didn't pick. And I got a quarterback that's still over $50 million next year that you got to pay that I didn't pick him either. I don't want to sign myself up to be a part of that. Now, you can circumvent that to some degree with the quarterback to say, look, it's guaranteed salary. We understand it's restrictive. But if you want to find and identify your quarterback to come in here and take the job, whenever that opportunity arises for you, go for it. In the meantime, we have a quarterback in place who could be a starting quarterback. And whenever you're ready to make that move, you can be opportunistic and go make that move. But if you saddle that on top of now you have a head coach that is existing in front of you, you're effectively you're giving player personnel feedback effectively to Mike McDaniel. It's too messy. I think it's too messy for me. Now, I think Tua will be here next year. And I think Tua the last 2 weeks has been fine. Oh, is he dramatically changing his skill set? No. He also played the Jets and the Panthers, right? Now, I think if you gave Tua a better offensive line, if you were more committed to throwing the ball 28 times a game and running the ball 35 times a game with consistency, and if you had the group to do it, could you be a persistent winning presence and make the playoffs every year with Tua? Yeah, I do. But that durability element exists, and now you've kind of graduated into a second contract. So the conversation changes a little bit when that's your payroll, right? I think that's true too. There's a lot of things that are simultaneously true and create a lot of challenges for the Dolphins to have to sort their way through. One thing that's also true is this team made some personnel changes. They put Cornell Armstrong on injured reserve. They activated Jordan Colbert from the practice squad to the active roster. So safety Jordan Colbert takes Cornell Armstrong's spot. And Kendall Sheffield, who was with the team for all of training camp, has been signed to the practice squad. Here's your warning sign on Kendall Sheffield. I personally think Kendall Sheffield's a better option than Cornell Armstrong, if we're being honest. But Kendall Sheffield, I don't believe signed anywhere from the time that he was cut from the Dolphins at the end of August to now. So there's some familiarity. There's an understanding of what you're trying to do. He got some early teams runs with you. Are you better off? Maybe. Probably. You're probably better off with Kendall Sheffield than Cornell Armstrong, who just an unserious option. But that's the problem, is you've been hammered by injuries in the secondary to a degree now in which, the group you have is kind of the group you got to dance with, and you got to figure out how to make it work. And this is not the week to have issues in the secondary because Quentin Johnston's balling out for the Chargers. Keenan Allen's one of the best route runners in football still, and Ladd McConkey showed some signs of life. Now, the Chargers offense not showing signs of life because they're banged up along the offensive line. Their run game's been hit with another loss with O'Mara and Hampton, but they have run for 150-plus yards each of the last 2 weeks. Now, teams have run on them. And that's the part for Miami. Man, we got to dig deep and we got to find some bite. I can't take this outside zone to the left 8 times in 14 carries and hope for the best and just run a bunch of different ways to get there, and nobody can block Trayvon Moehrig, so we don't get any outside leverage, and these runs are all getting bottled up. Run north and south. If that means you got to call some different run plays, call some different run plays. And that's the part for me with Mike. It's that Woody from Toy Story. You are a toy, a child's plaything. You are a run game coordinator, Mike. Be a run game coordinator. That's your lifeline right now. Play 22 and 12 and 21 and just make sure that you're keeping Waddle on the field for some level of a vertical threat and force teams structurally to have to wall down into the line of scrimmage. And then you could get shot plays like the 46-yard touchdown you got to Waddle, which was out of 22 personnel because you went heavy. And the DBs are caught sleeping and they're flat-footed and you can get over the top of them and come downhill so that you're forcing those linebackers to get down into the line of scrimmage. So that overhang defender can't just sit there flat-footed and take away your glance throw that you like to throw so much. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I have better X's and O's answers than Mike McDaniel. But I do know by watching the film that we are defining insanity by trying the same thing over and over again, just different ways to get there. Do something different. See how it goes. It might take some stress off your young offensive lineman. You might like it. You might like these guys might like punching somebody in the mouth. We haven't seen enough of it. Give them a chance to do it. Because the Chargers, say what you will about the Chargers. They have their own rookie in Jamari Caldwell on the inside there. They got Tier Tart's been a well-graded player on PFF, and yet this team's given up 608 yards on the ground in the last through 5 games. They're averaging 4.8 yards per carry allowed. That's 27th in the NFL. They've given up more than 160 rushing yards the last 2 weeks to the Giants and Commanders. And it's not like they got torched by Jaden Daniels on the ground. He didn't even rush for 40 yards. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt ran for 111. Pound the rock. See what happens. Might take some of the heat off your seat. I would love to see it. I want these guys to hang in there because it means they're winning. Winning cures all. So go ahead and start winning some games. See what happens. Be pretty cool. I'd be a big fan. Kyle Krabs. Keep it locked in here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Appreciate you guys checking out the show. I'll be back to talk to you all again tomorrow. We have crossover Thursday with Locked On Chargers. We had the squad show that went live today with Grease and Jeff Scanina. Hope to talk to you all again soon.